This is Linda Gunn here. Today we're going to talk about small group teaching. I'm just going to let you read through the first few slides and then I'll catch up with you partway in. There'll be some voiceover on this presentation, but not on every slide. So if you just read through the first few slides and then I'll catch up with you once you're partway through. So you've had the chance to have a look at the beginning of this lecture, and I've posed some questions for you so that you can have some ideas in your own mind about what you consider to be a large group, what's a small group, what's the benefits, what's the disadvantages. So I've popped up some slides here just to have a think really about what we mean by groups. If we're talking about clinical skills, obviously the picture on the right hand side, in order to try and teach this group of students, past students of the BSc Oral Health Science, in order to teach these students, it would be very difficult to do this as even a small group like this trying to do clinical skills here, because they can't all see, they can't get forward to see what's going on. If you were to do a demonstration here, it would be really very, very difficult for them to see exactly what's going on. If we have a look again then at the slide on the left hand side, while these happy students are all qualified, what we're seeing here is that two people trying to engage in a demonstration and to get as much from it as they possibly can is about the limit to what we can manage with clinical skills, and we would really need them to be involved just very closely with the teacher. We look at the other group at the bottom here. The reason I've used this one is not only because of the numbers, you're getting on to looking at a fairly large group to try and teach here, but the makeup of the group and how that influences how you behave and what staff involved here as well. Obviously you wouldn't be teaching staff, but I think it's important that you understand how it feels when the group changes, not only in terms of numbers, but the makeup, their background, their understanding or their prior knowledge. These things all have to be taken into consideration when you're thinking about teaching small groups. So we've had to think about some feelings, possibly how the students might be feeling in this situation. If they're in small groups, it's really difficult for them sometimes because they're very close to you and you get the chance to see their facial expressions, even if it's on VC. You need to involve them all. It is a small group. You need to use this as the very best way of teaching, and it gives you a huge amount of opportunity to be able to have discussions with the students to find out their opinions and views. You don't get that in large groups or in lecture theatres. But the difficulty with that is that the poor students are sitting there feeling quite exposed, as you do as a teacher, I have to say, but quite exposed, especially if they're unprepared, which really is one of the tricks. I suppose we need to say to all our students before they come into the lecture that they do have to be well prepared for small group sessions. It's also probably wise to give them some idea what these small group sessions are going to involve, if there's going to be case studies or discussion, to give them some idea of what the topics might be that we would be discussing, to give them the chance to prepare. But the small groups themselves are tricky because you might find that you've got some students who are really overpowering and take over the whole class every single time. And there's others who sit back. Now, the ones that sit back might well be sitting back thinking, I don't want to get involved and I feel embarrassed. Or they might be thinking, somebody else is going to do all the work for me here, why should I bother? And it's up to you as the teacher to be able to control that a lot and bring in the people that aren't maybe being quite so forthcoming. You don't want to embarrass them, you don't want to put them on the spot, but you do need to try and think about inclusiveness in this small group teaching. They all need to learn from one another. Whether they want to or not, they will do that. You as the teacher, when you're doing small group teaching, need to be well prepared, but it gives you the opportunity to hand over a lot of the learning to the students. Also, some of the teaching, because they teach one another very well. And this kind of thing is very much in the affective mode of teaching. In other words, we want to instill some kind of attitude, behaviour, responsibilities. All these words are the kind of words that you're trying to get over in your teaching session. It's not so much just about knowledge. People can have the knowledge, but when you've got small groups together, you really want them to start to change their opinions, their attitudes, their approaches to things, and to be able to give examples to one another so that they can illustrate what it is that they're explaining and what they're meaning. Small group teaching can be very good, but it takes a lot of confidence on the part of the teacher, and it also takes a degree of responsibility on the part of the student. It's very clear that we have to be careful about what we're doing with small groups. It mustn't become, as I say in the slides, a small lecture. Lectures are something different. Lectures are very teacher-based. They don't have much involvement with the students at all. And if you imagine yourself standing in front of a group of 200 students, you can understand why there would be very little interaction between the group and the lecturer. So lectures are used in particular situations to get a lot of information across to a large number of students in a very short period of time. But as for interaction with the group or the audience, really it doesn't happen very much. So small group teaching gives you the opportunity to use lots of other methods, such as case discussions and having discussions with the students about their opinions. So I think that it's important also to look at the group. Why does this work so well? Why does a small group work better than such a large group? Well, when you have this interaction, we talk about Truckman. I've mentioned him in one of the slides, and Truckman goes through a series of, or talks about how students go through a series of collaboration, really. So the first is forming, where the students are all getting together and they're getting to know one another a wee bit. But then there's storming, where the students all begin to discuss a topic and come to conclusions. They move into norming, where what they've decided on is the way that they want to go and what they consider to be a degree of normality. And then on to performing, where they actually show you that they can put this into practice and that they understand what it is. There's a whole lot more to Truckman, and it's really worthwhile just having a look at the reference I've put at you, the reference I've put for you at the end of the presentation. Very interesting. I'm not sure that you recognise what's going on all the time when you're busy trying to teach people, but once you come away from it, you realise what has happened, and it happens every time, and it's really, really interesting. So please have a look at that. Other than that, it really just brings us to the final part of this lecture, really about some ideas about how to teach students in a small group teaching session. One of the best ways of doing it, of course, is to go and observe the other tutors doing it and see what you like from what they do and what you dislike from what they do, and the kind of things that you might like to take on board when you're doing this form of teaching.